All right, I have a good one here today. This is a 2004 Mitsubishi Pajero with the dreaded GDI engine, 6-cylinder, 6G72. But the problem with this today is not the engine. The problem is with the air conditioning. The customer complaint is that the air conditioning is not working. It stops working mid-drive, or sometimes when you're just putting on the car, the light comes on and then it starts to blink. And then when it blinks, air conditioning goes off. When you put it off and put it back on, nothing happens. It doesn't respond to anything. The controls stop working altogether. So it's defaulting. I came here yesterday and something very interesting happened. And I don't know the problem yet, but this is what my experience was. I asked them, how does this thing default? Does it default when you're driving? Is it when you are idling? They said there is no rhyme or reason to it. It just does it. But when it does it, it doesn't stop doing it. I tried yesterday, tried to get it to default. Couldn't get it to default at first. Ran the car for about 45 minutes and the AC was on steady, no problem. But when I turned the car off, went to my car to get something, came back, turned it on, it defaulted and it started blinking, and that was immediate. So I just turned the car on, started it, and it stayed on for 5 seconds and then started blinking. So that's when I knew, interesting. The problem is actually instant when you turn the compressor on. Actually, when I had the clutch kick on, it stayed for 5 seconds, then it kicked off and it started blinking. Now, this is where it gets interesting. I've tried to communicate with this thing and it doesn't communicate at all. It makes an effort, the scanner makes an effort to communicate with it, but gives up. I checked the wiring and I made sure that the wiring is reaching the data connector properly, which it is. So my suspicion is just that I am using a modern scanner and it's unable to have the old protocol for this. No problem. I looked at all the common faults that this can give out, and there are 5 different faults, and I tested for all those 5 things when it was defaulting, and everything on that list was checking out. So there was the temperature sensor for the heater core, the temperature sensor for the evaporator core, the ambient temperature sensor for outside, and then there is the blend doors for the mix and for the air outside and inside recirculation. Those are the only codes that can be flagged from this, and everything during the default, everything checked out fine. So what I decided to do is to go to the wiring diagram, and I decided to check the lock sensor on the magnetic clutch and the magnetic clutch itself. And I hooked up my Pico to the magnetic clutch and to the lock sensor and to the crank sensor. So the lock sensor is just a rotational sensor that is on the compressor itself. What the computer does is it compares the crank sensor rotation to the rotation of the lock, and if it sees a disparaging rotation, it locks out the compressor because it assumes that the compressor is either locked up or it is slipping. So that's what it does, and it's actually the engine computer that does that. But something interesting happened. When I hooked it up and I did not have my attenuator on it, when I turned on the car, it defaulted as I was capturing, and my Pico just haphazardly froze and then rebooted. So I lost that capture. So I was like, damn, this thing defaulted and I lost my window when it defaulted, and it wasn't defaulting that often. So I decided, let me try and put it on and off occasionally until it defaulted. So about 3 or 4 tries later, it defaulted again, and the same thing happened. My scanner rebooted, it froze, then it rebooted, and I lost the capture. When it did that the second time, I notice this is a pattern. And I want to tell you guys something. This especially happens with people in the West. When you're used to a machine for so long, when you use it for a very long time, you get to understand how it functions and its little quirks that it has. I have used this scope for about 4 years now, and I am so used to the way it functions. I know all its weaknesses up to now, well, at least most of them, unless new ones come up. What I've noticed is whenever you get a high voltage spike on any of the inputs, it freezes, then it reboots. That's the behavior of this. So sometimes we shortchange ourselves by always upgrading to the latest and greatest thing, because you don't get a chance to know your equipment for a very long time. So this is the beauty of sticking with old equipment that just works. You get to know how it functions, and you get to know what it does in different circumstances. So when I saw that the second time, I stopped everything. I said, I'm not going to continue because I risk damaging my scope. I had a feeling that I was getting a high voltage spike on the line that I was scoping the magnetic clutch. So today I got an attenuator, and that's what is here on this line. So that is my attenuator here. And what this does, it steps down the voltage by 20 times. It helps me see voltages much higher than I would see without this, and it also protects my scope. So with this in line, I can see voltages up to 400 volts safely with my picoscope. So that's what I want to do today. I want to see what we are having on this channel. My suspicion is we are getting a voltage spike, and that voltage spike, not only is it killing my scope, but it's also killing this computer if that's the case. So that's just a suspicion I have, but you always check your suspicions out with data. So let me go on the wiring diagram and show you how I am hooked up. So here we are in the wiring diagram, and before we go to the wiring diagram, let me just tell you what I meant by the possible trouble modes. So this is the heater and air conditioner troubleshooting manual. Let's go to the troubleshooting, and you will see that the only way to retrieve codes is by using the Mute 2, basically a diagnostic scanner. And these are all the possible codes that you can retrieve. Inside air temperature sensor system, either short or open. Outside air temperature sensor system, either short or open. The heater temperature sensor system, either short or open. The air thermal sensor, this is for the evaporator. And the potentiometers for the air mix and outlet inlet air. And as I said, I checked out all these. I tested all of them on the wiring diagram, and they are all here. So these are the temperature sensors, and then these are the servos. I tested all their inputs, and the inputs are valid. So our errors are not coming from these. So what I decided to do, let me look at the magnetic clutch. Now, the magnetic clutch is controlled by a relay here, and it is controlled by the engine computer. So the engine computer is responsible for turning the relay on and off, but there's a monitor. So on this magnetic clutch, the load side of the relay, when this turns on, sends power to the magnetic clutch, but also gets monitored on our AC ECU pin 20. That's on the blue and white wire. So I'm here on channel 2. Then there's a lock sensor. This is the one it's just a position sensor. So it'll produce a pulse every revolution of the AC magnetic clutch, and that one is sensed on pin 9 of D49 of the AC ECU, and that's on the blue and red wire. And then outside the car, I have my crank position sensor on the hood on channel 3. So right here we have our AC computer, and at the back of it I have probed the two lines. So channel A is my lock sensor, channel B is my AC magnetic clutch sense line, and then outside the car we have our crank sensor. Let me just show you that real quick. So the crank sensor is on this harness right here, very convenient, and that is my monitor for it. So now with those three lines, I want to see now with my attenuator in place what will happen when we default, because as I said, each time I was defaulting, this thing was hanging and rebooting, and I'm guessing we're having a voltage spike. So let's set up the Pico and then we'll fire up the car and see what happens. All right, Picoscope is running and we are ready to go. Let's put the key on. They always leave the AC on, so when you put the key on, the light comes on, the fans come on, as you can hear them. Let's start the car and wait for the compressor to turn on. There it is, just turned on, and it should default within 5 seconds. Let me pause the scope, and it hasn't defaulted. So right now we are blowing nice and cold air, very nice, and it hasn't defaulted. So let's see what normal looks like. So this is my lock sensor. Let me just bring this here. This is my lock sensor voltage in there. So let me show you what it is. It's basically a CAM sensor-ish kind of signal, and what the engine computer does is to compare them. Each pulse is one revolution of the compressor. It compares it with the crankshaft, and it wants to see an even number of revolutions for the crankshaft and the AC. That's all it does. So if you get a wide spacing here, it's going to default. So right now this is normal. Let's check out a flyback voltage, and I can see why my Pico was turning off. So right now here we have a hit. Let's measure that voltage. So it's 49 at the peak top, and down here we've got negative 100. Yes, this is why my Pico did not like this. It's going over 100 volts, and yeah, that kind of shocks the Pico. Okay, well, it did not default here, so I'm not going to make too much of this. I want to see the stage where it defaults. So let's save this as normal working, and then we're going to try and get it default. Right, let's try this again. Clutch is kicked on, and we have no default. So what I will do is shut off, and I'm going to try and get it default. Oh wait, check out this flyback on the shut off. Now I remember when this thing was defaulting, the compressor was going off, and this flyback voltage, wow, 188, close to 190 volts. That's insane. Let's just take an accurate measurement of that compressor shut-off voltage. That flyback is 190 volts. That is really high. That is really high. That's not good for my Pico or for the AC computer. But is that our cause, really? Let's see. We'll just have to continue until we get it default. Never go on gut feeling alone, always test. If we can't get this thing to default, we have to wait until it acts up. Oh, this is not on. Oh, there, it's defaulted. Fantastic. Oh, look at that, guys. You see that? Let's check this out. Do you see the problem? Look at the amplitude of the lock sensor. So, compressor was turned on here. We went on, we stayed on, but this amplitude is low, and then it shut itself off. There, it's where it shut itself off. Amazing. This is a bad lock sensor in the compressor. That is so cool. Amazing. How, pray, will you see this without a scope? This is really amazing. This lock sensor has a problem. It sometimes doesn't give an output, and because it sometimes doesn't give an output, the engine computer, and why am I saying engine computer? Well, it's because the engine computer is the one that is responsible, as you can see that, for turning the magnetic clutch off. So there is some kind of communication between the AC ECU and the engine computer. Actually, not some kind, there is communication. Here it is. That's your communication circuit. There's one for the multi-display, but there is also another one, I'm sure, if I look through here, for the engine computer, and I think it's this line right here, and this line is responsible for telling the computer either to turn off or turn on the magnetic clutch. But we have a problem with our lock sensor. Now I want to get this to do it again, and then we are going to see if our lock sensor is going to output voltage again or not. But that is pretty cool. Let's just quickly take a measurement of this lock sensor. So this one, this is when it defaults. This amplitude is 113 millivolts. Okay, very nice. Let's open the one that we saw was normal operation, where it doesn't default. You can see it's much bigger. It's just 0 here, and this amplitude here is about 400 millivolts. Okay, good. Now, for something to be scientific, remember, we always need to have multiple measurements. So let's play this, and we're going to start the car again. I want to see another default. Compressor kicked on, and we're blowing cold, and we've not defaulted. Let's pause that. And as you can see here, look at our amplitude. So let me leave this up here on that line. I am filtering it, so all that noisy crap will not be read. Let's try again. So that one is good, and again our amplitude is good. Let's keep going until we get a default. I just need one more measurement to make it scientific. Remember, scientific process must be repeatable. No default, and I can still see amplitude is good. Okay. And there we have a default. Nice. Pause that, and again, same thing. Look at that amplitude. That amplitude is messed up. Okay, now before we get trigger happy and pull the Canon on that lock sensor, let's see what this needs. So we have got a sense line here, and this should just be a VRS sensor, so it just produces a magnetic field, a voltage based on the velocity. So this side should be a ground, so it goes here to 6L. Let's go to 6. Let's look for L, which is here, AC compressor, and look at this. So it's connected here. Now the question is this: does this ground remain steady, or does this ground get messed up from this guy? If it does, then you know what it would do? It would affect everything. It would affect the ambient temp, the air thermometer, the water heater, the sun load sensor, every single sensor here. So let me probe here, and I want to make sure that our ground here remains good. If we see an elevated ground here, then that is going to diminish our amplitude on our lock sensor. So we need to be very careful. Do we have a bad module, or do we have a bad compressor? So let's probe number 29 on that blue yellow wire and put it on channel D and see what we have. All right, I have connected my ground to channel D, and let's now start the car again. There's something else that I saw strange on the blue channel. When it defaulted, when I put off the car, there was some kind of weird event that happened on that blue channel. So if I see it, I'll show you what I mean. So far that looks good. I'm actually seeing in the noise and I can tell when my lock sensor is good or not. It's about to start raining, and I've been trying to get this thing to default. It's not been able to. We're just going to keep trying. This is how diagnosis goes sometimes, especially on these intermittent problems. They can be irritating. But you have to persist. You have to. There we go. You have a default. Nice. Let's pause that. And as you can see, our ground remains true. Nothing wrong with our ground, which supports the test I did yesterday when there was a default. There was totally nothing wrong with the other sensors. So we are done. We have a bad compressor lock sensor. Unfortunately, this is part of the compressor. There is no way around this other than buying a new compressor. But guys, this is what diagnostics is all about. Getting to the root problem the first time with no guesswork. When I came here today, I was expecting to find that when this thing opens, it hits my scope with high voltage, simultaneously hitting this and getting it to default. But that's not the case. I'm glad I waited and tested. It's the sensor inside that is bad. It's just not outputting voltage. It's a weak sensor. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. What do? That's how things roll. New compressor for this one, or I don't know if you can get a lock sensor and put it in there, but that means taking apart the compressor, and if we do that, we have to get another gasket kit. I am all for doing that, but to my mind, I do not know anyone that sells these lock sensors. They're usually part of the housing, and even removing them, it normally destroys the housing. So I'm not going to go that direction. Look, I don't have time for that. Get a new compressor. So that's the diagnosis for this one. Bad news for him. I was really hoping it was a problem with just the kickback, because I had a solution for that. And we're done.